Privet Katila Wanning Ruski desu. And today I wanted to do something very special. It's going to be a pretty long video, but today I wanted to grade Donald Trump's presidency. Basically give out a grade based on how I think Donald Trump did. Now, this is going to come from a right-wing perspective. Now, and my own personal perspective too. So not just my own. It's more. I'm generally a right-wing type of guy, but I have like for example on the environment and on in the economy, I consider myself center left. Now, so I have so it's kind of my own personal grading system. So you guys might not agree with it. You guys might agree on some things, not others. It's just my own personal grading system because how you think a president did depends on what your ideology is. Now, how am I going to do this? Well, the way I'm going to grade is going to be based on a curve. What that means is that I'm not going to grade based on like the perfect president because I understand that people aren't perfect. People aren't going to get everything I want done. They're never going to get an A. So I wanted Trump to get a chance to be able to get graded fairly. You're not going to get perfect president, but I want to say how I am going to grade though is comparing how much good did he do on an issue and how much bad did he do on it. So when I do immigration, for example, as one, I'm going to be like, okay, not idealized. What's if he did everything I wanted in immigration? Because if he did, he would have only got a C-, even though Donald Trump isn't a bad person on immigration. He just didn't do everything I wanted. But what I'm going to grade is how much good did he do on the immigration front and how much bad did he do. Compare the two and then give a grade. And I'm going to stick to letter grades. And again, it's going to be based upon my interpretation of it. Along with this, this is also going to have no script to it. So I'm actually not reading from a script right now. I'm like just talking. I have notes. I have notes on what I think on like topics. So I have like immigration, foreign policy, so on and so forth. And I have like things that he did good and bad on each. However, there's not like a pre-planned script, so there might be some ums and such. I might stumble over myself a few times, so be prepared for that. And also, I'm already doing it, but anyway, so yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna give grades to the specific subpoints, and then I'm gonna give grades based upon at the end. I'm gonna give an overall grade. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first big issue, the biggest thing we're going to conquer, the thing that capitulated Trump in the first place, immigration. We're going to grade Trump on immigration. Now the way this is his bread and butter thing. This is his, if you think of Trump, if you think of an issue that defines Trump, more than any other issue, it's immigration. Now, in the 2020 thing, it was kind of overshadowed by COVID and the race riots and such like that. However, this is the thing that you could say defines Trump, especially in the beginning. And honestly, to me, this is the most important issue, one of the most important issues. And I think it should have been addressed when Republicans had complete control. But how did Trump do? How did Trump do on immigration? Well, he did pretty all right in terms of overall what he did. So the first thing that it was kind of the first scandal of Trump's presidency is when all it was like the first thing I remember the white women and just people like libs in general went out and protested for. It was the travel bans. Now the travel bans were the Muslim bans, which they were not, but the travel bans were good. I like them because basically, and the idea is that it's like, okay, we're gonna ban them for a few months and then put in better vetting procedures, and then we could raise them. Now, activist judges try to strike it down, and then finally the Supreme Court had to intervene, and they upheld them. But them trying to do it in him doing these travel bans was good. I have no clue why we need but I would have done like a permanent, like just mass ban of immigration. Like, just why do we need refugees? We don't need them. And but those specific countries in particular, though, too, like, we don't need the most desperate people in the entire world. We're full. And I think those travel bans were good and solid in what he did. Now, I would have made them permanent. I would have not made them just like, oh, we'll do some vetting and then that's it. Like, they were very lukewarm. They weren't actually the best thing, but honestly, they were good. There wasn't a bad policy at all. Another thing that Trump did that was pretty solid, reducing overall refugee numbers. If you look at how much refugee numbers he actually did, how much refugees came in 2016, the year before he got sworn in, it was like 80,000, if I remember correctly. And in 2020, the number was 15,000. And that's a reduction in refugees. He campaigned on that. He executed it, and great, he did it. So honestly, nothing but praise on that front. He reduced overall refugee numbers. Another thing that he did in terms of asylum policy is his Remain in Mexico policy, which is perfect. This is asylum policy done right in terms of immigration. Basically, the idea that most refugees, most asylum seekers actually are coming from they call the triangle, the El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, those places. They're actually not coming from Mexico. The idea is that since you go through Mexico, which is a safe country, might not be the best country for you. It's not in terms of like it's the best. It's not like it's not like the best like first like top country in the world. America might be better, but Mexico is a solid, safe country. And since you went through it, you're not a refugee. You're an economic migrant. And thus, if you're asking for asylum, you pass through Mexico, you have to remain in Mexico. You cannot just go through Mexico and then stay. Trump also worked with Central American people to leaders to help control the people there. And I think that was really, really solid. This was a really solid thing of Trump to do. That was so in terms of overall asylum policy, while obviously not everything was perfect, everything all the things he's done to reduce the amount is pretty solid, because I think that's actually a place where Trump has a lot of power, and thus he was able to wield it in a pretty solid way. Another thing that he did that was pretty good was removing TPS protections from places like Haiti and El Salvador. TPS is supposed to be called temporary protected status, but some of these temporary people have been temporarily in the United States for 30 years. So, this is just insane that they were given, insane amounts of protections. It's basically just a way for them to get in there forever, instead of a temporary thing. So it's just how many people can we stuff into America? But we need it. But now it's so good for him for getting rid of TPS protections. If I remember correctly, there's a few other ones that he didn't go through. So he didn't do everything for TPS, but I think he did. He didn't. I don't think he expanded TPS for many. If I remember correctly. Some other thing that he did that was pretty good was his next thing. That now this is like the main thing when you think of immigration is his border wall. Now to me, the border wall isn't a major thing. It's not like something I want. It's not actually the most effective thing to do. But it was more of a message to me. But in terms of what he did to try to get expanding border security, he did a pretty good job. His emergency declaration was pretty solid. He tried to get it through Congress through a legislative deal. That failed because the leaders were asked. He should have. Now he did this during when the new Congress people were coming in. This was after the midterms, and he tried to get it's like, why are you doing it now? They just won control of the House. You won't be able to get anything now. Why didn't you do this when your Republicans were in charge? Why? That's a good question. And but the thing is that the border wall and he put troops on the border, which was good. He surged money from the Homeland Security and the Pentagon for the emergency declaration and sent it to the border. Now, the thing with that, though, is that, and, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a bad thing because he got it from, the military. He was supposed to send, that's defund. It's like, well, think about it. If you're going to defend we're getting these places, Homeland Security, the military, they're supposed to defend our nation, right? And what better way to protect the nation than protecting the border? How about instead of funding Afghanistan's border security, we fund our own border security? There's no reason why we need, this is the number, we can't protect our borders with funding, with upgrading our putting more fencing, putting more walls and such. No, we could, but, no one wants to, they were being outraged about that. But in terms of overall, he did do fencing, and some places had walls, and I think he did at the end of the day 500 miles of new stuff, I believe. But honestly, he did a pretty solid job, in that department in terms of border security. In terms of work visas, what Trump did during the COVID crisis, where he was able to stop new work visas being issued. Because here's the thing, tens of millions of Americans were unemployed, and guess what? Trump said, hey, you have to hire Americans. You cannot just be hiring foreign labor even though it's cheaper for you. And I think that was a very solid move. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that's racist. You can't do that. He could, and that was a very smart move. Now, I think Trump did that in May or June. I made like a meme video about it. But at the end of the day, better now than later. So it was very, I think that was a very good move. Obviously, work visas need to be cut down. High skilled, low skilled, all skills. Americans need to be hired first before immigrants, and despite it that it took a pandemic to do it, it was a good shot for him to do it. To use the pandemic to restrict work visas. Another thing that he did was really solid the public charge rule. Now, the public charge rule came about in 2019, I believe. Now, a bit late, but I think there was a very good rule that was implemented in which basically the public charge rule says that you have to demonstrate that you will not take like cash welfare, and it kind of expanded that definition to like Medicaid and such like that. And basically, like, can you support yourself if you're going to immigrate? Now, that seems common sense. Like, even if you're a pro-immigration person, it's like, hey, maybe, yes, that's like even a good thing for us. Like, but no, this was a giant, quote-unquote scandal. Even though it was complete asinine that it was even, this is like, and it's like, oh, but if you put this public charge rule in place, that means the overall immigration levels are going to get cut by like a third. And it's like, well, that's pretty damning about our immigration system now, isn't it? Where basically tons of people are public charge. Like, why? Like, even no sane society would do this. If you are public charge, you need to be basically basically you cannot come in. I mean, that seems fair, I would think. But that was a very solid rule. Now, another thing is that overall legal immigration rates have gone down in terms of if you look at overall the amount of permanent residents in 2019, I believe, was 600 to 700,000, I believe. Before, when Trump started in 2016, it was 1.1 million new immigrants came in, and that is a solid drop. That there was lots of reasons for that, mostly, but legal immigration has gone down under Trump. And in 2020, we don't have the numbers for it yet, but we're assuming basically that immigration levels fucking got slammed down. Now, that's mostly COVID's fault. It's nothing that Trump did, but besides the work thing as mentioned earlier. But legal immigration levels have gone down. Now, this isn't some permanent law thing. I would have done like some sort of permanent cap on legal immigration. But yeah, I think it was solid, and I think that should have... we'd have to credit Trump for reducing legal immigration levels. Another thing that Trump did that was right, he tried to get the a citizenship question on the census, which was a good idea. I think this was something that to help make sure that and now people are like, oh, but it's gonna make illegal immigrants fear. It's like, yeah, if they're illegal immigrants, they should fear. They should go back to their countries and come here legally, or not come here at all, actually. But anyway, those are good things. Now, there's some bad things that Trump did. A lot of these aren't really bad stuff he did per se. He didn't really do anything negative on immigration. He's done some. It's more like strategic blunders on his part, not being initiative enough. Like, for example, I've mentioned this already, but there was no major legislative changes to the U.S. immigration system. There wasn't any new laws that were passed that overhauled it. That should have been the number one priority when Trump got in office. There was no depression. It was like they could do whatever they wanted, and they blew it. They fucking blew ass and did nothing with it. And immigration should have been the first thing they would have passed, and without that, then it would have been, but they didn't. They wobbled around and never got into it. And this was not tax cuts, not a thing. And so this was a major blunder. I know this was mostly congressional Republicans' fault, but he should have been a major pusher of that. Now, I know he tried to get the RAISE Act passed, which was something they proposed, but it wasn't voted on. What Trump should have done is said, hey, if you don't vote for this specific bill, we're going to primary you, and we're going to destroy your career. Like, he could do that. But sometimes I feel like he doesn't understand the power he has. Another thing is that he also praised illegal immigration. We don't want legal immigration, Donald. We want less immigration. We want the end of mass immigration. We want the end of illegal immigration. He's good on illegal immigration. Remember, one thing Trump did good is he pulled the Overton window. Remember, Republicans used to be very pro amnesty, and Trump at least made people say, okay, no illegal immigration. But now we have to say no mass legal immigration. Another thing he did that was wrong. He repeatedly tried to get DACA passed, and he didn't eliminate it on day one. He tried to, but ultimately that was I think he eventually did get rid of it, but he always tried to pass it, and it's like you put the cart before the horse. I understand that in any immigration reform thing, if we don't have a supermajority, there can be some people who want something okay, we'll give DACA in exchange for this. Okay, but this was extremely sad. This is. You were too forceful to being pushing for it. Another thing that he did that was really bad was that he never moved on birthright citizenship. He said he would, and it was something in the 2018 midterms, and he never pushed. He never got rid of. He never signed an executive order banning it. Even if it got challenged in court, but he didn't even try to do it. Anything on that front. And overall, I think there was a lot of missed opportunities that could have been done, which is why I think overall I'll give Trump a B+. Not because he's and the reason why it's that's a B+ is because, and might even be an A- is because, again, it's not perfect, but the reason why I say B+ is that while he did a lot of good things, there was a lot of missteps, a lot of failed. I think he could have done a lot more. Though obviously a lot of it should have been done on the legislative front, so that's not really Trump's fault. But at the end of the day, that should have been something that he could have done more on. But immigration overall, I think, was pretty solid. The next thing that I'm going to grade Donald Trump on is his foreign policy, and foreign policy is a very broad thing. And when I'm going to grade him is going to grade him basically on everything foreign policy related. On his war, on wars, on his diplomacy, on international agreements he did, on the military policies, all that. So without further ado, let's jump right in to see about foreign policy. The biggest thing that I think he did that I think is really impressive, he didn't start any new wars. Unlike Obama, who started the war in Libya, started the war in Somalia, who started the war in Syria, and expanded upon George Bush's wars. He didn't start any new wars. Now, not causing more problems does not mean that's it's better than that. Than not solving the problem. It's just that he didn't make it even worse. Which I think, despite that being a low bar, I think that is something to be said about his foreign policy achievements. In terms of Iran, I think his saber rattling with Iran was horrible. I think the nuclear agreement that Obama did was actually a good thing. I know some people might disagree, but it basically said, in exchange for sanctions relief, we will make sure we have basically the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Agency. They're the ones who inspect atomic weapons, and they're like, hey, you cannot have this amount of enriched uranium. And they check it, and they limit and there was an agreement, and where if they did, then the sanctions would snap back. This was really good. This gave Iran sanction relief, and unless you're some warmongering buffoon who wants Iran to die, well then no, we negotiate with lots of nations, and Iran's no different. And as long as they don't get this is a good way to make sure Iran does not get nuclear weapons. But he got out of it, and there was always I don't know how much there was a lot of saber rattling with Iran, and this was horrible for what Trump with especially his killing of Qasem Soleimani. Remember that thing where he when a drone got shot down, he wanted to bomb some Iranian facilities. He only got talked down by Tucker Carlson. There was some very bad. His saber rattling with Iran was pretty not good. And he basically never got us out. It didn't make it any easier to help with the neocons trying to bring us to war. And so he didn't give us any favors in like making cooler heads prevail. He was just very anti-Obama, who was trying to get a peace with Iran, and so he just did the opposite. I don't think that was pretty good. Now, he didn't go to war with Iran. He didn't actually, besides that when he killed Soleimani, there was a real threat there about there being, World War III was exaggerated, but a war with Iran almost. And that would have been catastrophic for America. Catastrophic. And a very big catastrophe. Anyway, in terms of Syria. Now, I think he withdrew from northern Syria. As far as I know, there's still some troops there. He should have withdrawn troops. And this goes for everything else, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya to Somalia. He's withdrawn troops. He added some troops in Afghanistan, but besides that, he hasn't pulled down all troops. He should have withdrawn all the troops. Because we can't do that. And, it's like, oh, but you see, if we leave Afghanistan, the Taliban will take over and force women to not have Tinder. I don't care. So he didn't do that. Now, obviously, it's not idealized, but he withdrew some troops, which was good, especially in 2020. But in the beginning, he didn't actually withdraw them right away. He actually increased in some cases. But in Syria, he withdrew some of them. But however, he didn't work with Assad to try to destroy radical Islam. He bombed some targets, and it's like, oh, but he finally enforced chemical weapons, which was a psyop. Assad didn't use chemical weapons. This was just they kept doing it. Remember, they did it in April 2017, then they did it in April again in 2018. It's like, oh, war didn't happen in 2017. Let's do it again. I'm kind of surprised they didn't do it again. However, so I'm kind of glad he did that. I'm not glad that there was no. I was glad there's no war. And I think he understood that he didn't want to be in endless war with Syria. But it was honestly could have done. But mixed record on Syria. In terms of Russia, there was no major rapprochement. Now, I blame the Democrats with his Russiagate, because I feel like if Trump tried to get closer with Russia, like maybe reduce arms sales, maybe open up some trading networks, negotiate, work together. There's really nothing that stops America and Russia from working together. The two major sticking points is Syria, where we back Islamic terrorists and they back the government. And then the second is Crimea, which shouldn't be a thorn. This is a Ukrainian-Russian problem, not a American problem. And Crimea is Russian anyway. And the thing is that, but those are the two major things. There's no, obviously we could be like, stop spying on us, but, that's because we're always antagonistic with them. We could make cooler heads. Now, I think Trump wanted to do that. I don't think he did anything bad with Russia. He did sign more sanctions for Russia, which was bad. But I think I blame that on, I think the reason why there wasn't more because of Russian conspiracy. So I kind of give a little bit more lenient for Trump on the Russian front. In terms of the North Korean front, I think he did good. That was actually one of the good states that I think he tried to reproach it. However, I don't think there wasn't any permanent deal made out of it. Maybe if he got a second term, there would have been more progress. I think there would have. But I think at the end of the day, there wasn't any major. There were some concessions. He got some remains returned. He got some stuff, but remember the North Koreans are kind of elusive. They get sanctions relief, and then they don't follow through. But the point of it is that he tried to do something, and I think the trying counts. And there was some stuff that got pushed through, but not as much. But I think, and that's because in the beginning he was actually very saber rattling with North Korea. So I think it was a good solid. Work with North Korea on North Korea front. Initially not, but again also towards the end he did it well, but also it's not as much as could be done. It wasn't like a treaty like Obama did with Iran. In terms of Venezuela, the saber rattling was for no reason whatsoever. Maybe it went in Florida with Cuba, also when he put sanctions on Cuba. I don't know if that, I don't know. There's a tightrope to be found. On my heart of hearts, there really is no reason to be antagonistic towards Cuba and Venezuela. None whatsoever. But maybe it helped us win Florida. I don't know. But in terms of just an objective policy thing, it's nothing, Venezuela was, Afghanistan actually was good. There was actually a Taliban peace deal that passed, and that was actually very solid. So but however, troops are still there. However, he's withdrawn some in 2020, and I think that's pretty good. And he's always wanted to, but the generals also keep fucking him over too, which is a kind of fault on his part. But anyway. But Afghanistan was alright, but he hasn't withdrawn fully. Now, Afghanistan I understand because that's where Al-Qaeda hid. Where Al-Qaeda hid. But now they're gone and they're dead, so we have to leave. Another thing that he did that was good, though, is that he wiped out ISIS. Which is, everyone says he basically accelerated destroying them, and that was good. In terms of Israel and Palestine, which is my preferred thing, he just basically kept sucking up to Israel. And if you're an Israel guy, then I think it was an A. He did everything Israel wanted, basically. And they didn't deserve it. If they were gonna get everything, if we wanted, in terms of a two-state solution, for example, moving the capital to Jerusalem, that was in any sort of two-state solution, would have been a shared capital, would have been like an international zone. However, he was a very big Israel person, which, I mean, I don't have anything against Israel, just, it should have been more, there should have been more for America, in terms of that. In terms of, but however, he did get some Arab states to recognize the Israel, like the United Arab Emirates and Morocco, and those are actually some solid, the peace record, Nobel Peace Prize worthy type things, which were good. We want people to recognize Israel, but also we want Israel to recognize Palestine. So those are the, mixed record on that. I think he was way too helping of Israel. I think he should have got more out of them. But however, another thing they did in military is that he created the Space Force, which was a very solid move. I think that was a really smart move. I don't know if he masterminded it, but it was a good thing that he signed into it. And I think he increased military spending. That was bad. I'm not fully, I'm not, so up about it, but, if we want to counter debt, military spending should be decreased, specifically in buying new weapons and expanding things. We should be just, we shouldn't be so gung-ho of increasing military spending. We don't need to be. We need to be withdrawing from the world. In terms of that, Trump didn't do much. Another thing he did with Europe, especially with NATO, is that he made NATO members pay their fair share, or he wants to make that, and there's more investment from the European allies into NATO. I think NATO should we to try to get Russia into it. However, he also did withdrawals from NATO, though, which was, I think, something that he wanted to do. But also another thing is that he withdraws from some entangling alliances in the UN. He didn't withdraw from the UN, but which I think we need to be in the UN. But he withdrew from stupid stuff like we were still we were on the human rights panel or something, and it was just retarded. And there's just a few things I think the World Trade Organization withdrew, or was the World Health Organization. But anyway, all these entangling stuff that we were able to get rid of and withdraw from. I think there should have been more, but overall. So in terms of that, he didn't start any new wars. He was, he withdrew some troops at the end of the day, lower than when he started. However, not everyone was left. He on some issues like North Korea, he did well. On issues of Iran, he did worse. There could have been a lot of things to be done there. And honestly, his foreign policy is either a C+ or a B-. If I'm generous, I'll say B-. I know I put down the grades already, but on the thumbnail, the pictures I'm using, but C+ or a B-. Foreign policy, I'll get more. You probably even not even he did some good things, but he's also done some bad things on it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on his foreign policy grading. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to mention. In terms of Saudi Arabia, it's a terrorist state, and he just sucked up to them. I have no feelings either way, but it's if you're so tough about radical Islam, Saudi Arabia should have been your number one target. They're the ones who did 9/11, and he ultimately didn't. He didn't do anything with. He kept being soft on them like other U.S. presidents. But a bad thing is that he kept putting U.S. He vetoed a bipartisan solution to stop selling U.S. weapons to Saudi Arabia in their war in Yemen. And because it's like, well, like, why should we be using American arms and American manpower to help fight with Saudi Arabia in their war in Yemen? It's not our fight. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. So the next thing I'm going to focus on is that I'm going to grade is this trade and infrastructure policy, which is another big thing that he ran on in 2016. Now, in terms of what he did, is that in trade and infrastructure, there's a lot of ups and downs. Let's start with the downs. Let's talk about infrastructure. Now, while he has the right message, he always wanted an infrastructure deal, and he worked with Congress. Tried to work out an infrastructure deal, and this would have been a major thing he should have played in 2019 when the Democrats finally got control of the House. This is something that could have been pushed in a bipartisan way, while as he should have been pushing for immigration and stuff like something that only Republicans support. In his first term, he should have pushed for infrastructure in like 2019 when there wasn't a pandemic and there wasn't but Democrats didn't, because this is a bipartisan issue. However, in terms of like what he actually did, he didn't do anything. He didn't get a infrastructure package passed, and ultimately that was pretty sad. Again, this is a legislative fault, but he should have been pushing it relentlessly, but he didn't get an infrastructure package done. But again, that's mixed on who you blame. In terms of trade, he withdrew them from the TPP, which was good. His Buy American and Hire American executive order was pretty solid as well. It's just the same things as just like, why should we have trade agreements that just suck our jobs to other nations? We should, however, the thing, if you think about trade in terms of Trump's, is his tariff war with China. Now, with his tariffs on steel and tariffs on aluminum and so forth. Now, tariffs aren't the answer to everything. I'm actually kind of been less favorable of tariffs. I've kind of taken some economics classes, and they're not the best thing. Now, they are good. They're a good tool, but I don't think. But there's more to an economy than efficiency. Now, obviously, tariffs don't make the most economic efficient sense. However, there is something to be said about China, who has government subsidies, who has done intellectual cheating. They're a giant juggernaut that needs to be brought to heel. But and he's done really well in combating China's global trade dominance. Now, with I would have done something different with the TPP, which he didn't. I think the TPP as it is would have been just a sucking job. What we could have done is reoriented the TPP to where an export-oriented industrial policy. Now, this is a big thing, and I don't think Trump had the knowledge of it to actually do it. But what Trump could have done is wield it in such a way where we could have opened our trade with these Pacific nations and then exported American-made products. We would have had jobs here. We would have exported an American-made industry or American-made industrial projects and industrial products. Products abroad, and then they would have bought it and they would have got it, and that would have fueled. They would have got a bigger market, and it would have been America being the ones who sent products overseas, not them sending it to us. So that we could have made it, but again, he didn't make America move towards like self-sufficiency. The trade regime is kind of still on. Manufacturing is, we're still we're still living in the effects of deindustrialization, and Trump hasn't done much in terms of alleviating that. But I think this would have been it would have had, even if he did everything right, it would have been more. He would have had it done more than just what he could have done in a 4-year term. But he did pretty good with his tariffs, with his war on China. But there should have been like some sort of like more than just tariffs. Tariffs were just a band-aid on a bigger problem, which was the deindustrialization and us losing our productive manufacturing capacity. The other thing that he did that was all right, which was this new deal with which was this new trade deal, which was the USMCA. Now, there's nothing revolutionary about it. People call it like the new NAFTA, and it's fine. It's in terms of like what it's better than NAFTA, but it's not nothing big. So it's like you might think that because before he was slamming NAFTA, and then he passed something that was like not 85% of what NAFTA originally was, and so nothing. It wasn't a transformative thing, but I think what he did, I mean, in a slimy way, yes, he did do his like work. He did fulfill his campaign promise on NAFTA, but in terms of what he could have done with how to do trade, he should have, there was more to be done, but again, it was better than what it was before. I'll say that much. So that's his trade, and in terms of overall grade, I'll give him a B minus. Right sentiment, the same thing with foreign policy, but again, like the foreign policy segment, he was a bit lackluster in terms of what could have been done, and maybe he just didn't know what to do and such like that. So that's just, I think a B minus is a good grade for him on the trade and infrastructure front. So the next thing I'm going to grade him on is his COVID-19 response. This is a big thing. If he told me I was going to grade him on this in the beginning, I would have been like, what the fuck is COVID-19? But it's a big part of it. It's probably the biggest thing that's hit America in a long time. And it's, let's grade how he did on his COVID-19 response. Now, a lot of people think he just did horrible on it. There's some bad to it, but I think people are underestimating what he actually did in terms of COVID-19. So what did he do? So the first thing that I want to give him, that he deserves giant credit for is he passed the CARES Act, and he advocated for it. He wasn't just, he reluctantly did it out of necessity. No, he actively liked a lot of the things he did there. And the way I proved that is also when things started running out and there was no new things because Nancy Pelosi wanted to cock-block Trump from winning in 2020, so she was trying to deflect and defer and obstruct from doing anything. But he passed the CARES Act, and when those things are running out, he signed executive orders like expanding unemployment, expanding the student loan protection thing, and so the CARES Act had stimulus checks, had unemployment expansion, and had the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Had money for the vaccine development. It had money for testing and tracing. It had the eviction moratorium. He had bailouts though, and while I think I made a COVID-19 response video in April, I believe. So this was a bit after. So there was some. It was kind of early, I'll admit, but there was some things to be said about it, and I think one thing is giving stuff out to companies isn't a strategy. Now, I understand a lot of these were loans, but I think there should have been more restrictions on what they could have done. They should have not done stock buybacks. They should have not done like CEO reimbursement, and stuff like that. They should have. But I think bailouts aren't exactly evil in and of themselves. He also pushed for $2,000, and I think it was a brilliant campaign move. This is just a campaign thing, not objectively, but I think what he did for signing his checks is good. So he was someone, and in his heart of hearts, this is something I like. He wasn't a libertarian retard. He actually passed the CARES Act and advocated for it and pushed it through Congress. And I think that was a good thing that he signed it and passed it and got it done. Another thing he did was another great thing was Operation Warp Speed. This is something even Biden gave Trump credit for, and this is amazing. This is one of the greatest examples of the government and companies working together to the government and private companies working together to create something good for the American people. They used like a new mRNA vaccine, I believe, which is something that hasn't been done before, has been very rarely done, and they were able to develop a vaccine in 8 months, but maybe even less than that. They got it done in November, and they started building it in March, April. So less than 8 months, right? like 6, 7 months, something. But this usually takes years to get a vaccine. They did it super. This was one of the greatest accomplishments in science ever. This was amazing, and now we're vaccinating. Now Trump would have presided over vaccination, and he would have, and he's done some. And but a lot of them are trying to say, oh, it's going to old people, and old people are white, so we can't give them to the vaccine. We can't give them that, so we have to distribute it equitably, and then they're all dying. So that's the governor's fault, though, not Trump's. But he's given, and the vaccines have been starting to roll out. And the way Trump's the one who designed, his team, how he assembled it. They designed how to distribute vaccines with the military. It's good. I think this was a really Operation Warp Speed was amazing. A+ on that. In terms of what I mentioned before, he suspended travel and visas, and he also banned immigration from China. Remember in the beginning where people were like hug your local Chinese person because it's like, oh, they're racist towards Chinese people. Well, no, it's just like we needed to stop immigration from the sources. Again, mass global immigration was why it was able to spread so quickly, and we have to close our borders, and he did that instead of like embracing it and killing us all. Another thing that he did was he used the Defense Production Act to create face masks and ventilators. This was a very good way he could have basically using the power of government to produce what we needed, and then distributing the face masks and the ventilators and things that we need back to the states. I think also he put a lot of, instead of it being federally mandated, he gave people the option of using the defense of doing what they needed. He gave states resources, and then the states did what they needed to do on an individual level. And basically, some states stepped up to the plate and did some good stuff, and some states, Andrew Cuomo was being a giant asshat and didn't do anything, or did active bad stuff with his COVID response. But again, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. Trump just was very basic. He gave basic guidelines, and he made the supplies on the federal level, and he gave them to the states. And I think that was a really good, smart way of doing it. Another thing he did, again, I touched on this, is he tried to strike a balance between lockdowns and freedom. He always talked, but he was not always the best at it, but he at least tried to make a balance. And lockdowns just don't work. Lockdowns were extremely destructive to the economic health, to the physical health, to the mental health of Americans. Illnesses are up, mental illnesses are up, and just everything has gone worse because of lockdowns. And people want to live. We could either live in fear, or we could live, with basic precautions. We could live a life free. And we can't keep living in fear. Now, those are some good things I mentioned. Again, there's some things within those things, like I mentioned about the corporate bailouts, that should have been a bit more stricter, about how he should have maybe balanced, a few things like that. But there is some bad stuff. I think this is where Trump could have used COVID, because COVID was the right situation to use for right-wing populism. We couldn't produce our own face masks in America. Mass immigration brought COVID to our shores, and libertarianism is a fraud ideology which destroyed, which you need, and the power of government and the power of companies can work together to create good things. And this would have been a right-wing populist revolution, and he didn't quite seize the moment as much as he could have. I think there was so much scaremongering about COVID in the beginning. Now we understand. In the beginning, it was kind of crazy, but I think towards the end, we now understand that this is part of a great reset, that they're trying to destroy all the companies. Mass businesses are failing. Mass businesses are and all that. But I think Trump should have been more of a leader on COVID. I think if Trump just shut up, and this is something that could have done wonders for him in most of the presidency, if he just shut up, he, like Andrew Cuomo, just came out, said, hey, wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. We are doing this. We are sending states money, and be a leader, reassure the people, and tell them what you're doing. Give checks. If you did that, this would have been something that he could have seized the the thing, and his dismissive of COVID. And also another thing is that if you looked at the beginning, Trump was very dismissive of COVID. He basically didn't think it was a serious thing until later, and then even when it became a serious thing, he's like, "Oh, it's nothing's gonna happen of it," and all that. So he should have let things go with the experts. Now obviously sometimes experts, they don't do exactly everything what's best for the American people, but so not everything, but I think Trump didn't, when he could have been a better leader in COVID. And so in terms of like the policy, COVID was not that bad. Like I would have given I give him like an A- to a B, like in terms of to a B plus on his COVID response. But his overall leadership, like the way he handled it, I give him a C plus. I don't think he could have done a lot better in terms of his how he did it. So it should have been better. But in terms of leadership, but yeah, his COVID was pretty good actually. Despite and if you look, even though we might have the highest death rate, it's actually on par with other nations in terms of if you look at population size. So the next issue that we're going to discuss to grade Donald Trump's presidency on is healthcare, which is a good transition from COVID. So healthcare policy in particular, what has Donald Trump done in the realm of healthcare as a president? And to be honest, not too good. Not failure level, but pretty bad. Now, as a side, I am, like left wing on healthcare. I made a video on a right wing case for universal healthcare, and so I'm coming in from that perspective. And that perspective, Trump has done pretty badly. Under his watch, the uninsured rate has gone up. I think it almost doubled, I believe. There was no major healthcare put there. He tried to push a weak version, like tried to pass in the American Health Care Act, which failed, and it was actually worse than Obamacare. However, one thing he did do that was good one thing that was bad of Obamacare that he did get rid was the individual mandates. To me, my opinion is that if you're going to give us healthcare through taxes. Don't force me to get health insurance. That's my opinion. I think in part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act got rid of the mandate, which was good. Now, a few other things that Trump tried to do was lower prescription drugs. That was another bipartisan thing that he could have done. I don't think he tried to get some executive orders through, but nothing concrete of teeth went through. He said he was going to protect pre-existing conditions. However, he's tried to completely abolish all of Obamacare, and that was not that would have got rid of pre-existing conditions, but he tried to lower prescription drug prices, and he did try to pass laws that would cut a lot of healthcare programs in his proposed budget cuts. Now, none of those went through, so maybe whatever. But another thing is that there was no major healthcare reform. He didn't do anything in the realm of healthcare to actually overhaul the system. We still have tons of uninsured. We still have the highest spending as a percentage of GDP in the world. We still have millions of people who go bankrupt because of it. And honestly, healthcare wasn't a big thing out of Trump's presidency. There's nothing much to say because there wasn't, besides his big push in the early in 2017, which is another Ryan thing to get rid of Obamacare. He didn't get, but that didn't even pass, and it was not exactly the right type. And also, one thing that he did, I think, do was also the price billing, and I think surprise billing was banned under a law he passed, however, which was really good, or restricted, and that was a really good thing. So at the end of the day, nothing of note on healthcare. Some failed attempts, some good things, so not a complete failure, but pretty bad. I think I put down him as a grade of a C. But to be honest, now that I think about it, a C- would be more appropriate for him. So in this thing, I'm going to also do another broad thing, kind of like foreign policy. I'm going to talk about the economy. What did Trump do economic-wise? Workers, businesses, economic indicators. What has he done economically? This is very broad. And there's a few things to talk about. The first thing we're going to grade is his biggest legislative pass. I think you could say the biggest defining thing besides the CARES Act. This is the biggest thing in You could say in healthcare. What am I talking about? Sorry. The biggest legislative thing outside of all the things he had to do for COVID, and it was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It's a C plus law. I say it's a C plus law. There's a few things that are good in it and some things that are bad in it. But one thing I will say is it was not a priority. That was not a law you had to firstly go after. That was like one of the big things they tried to pass. It was not a good law to go for. To firstly go for. However, now that they passed it, it's an average law, a C plus law. What are some good parts of it? The good parts is that it increased the child tax credit. I would replace the child tax credit with some sort of direct payment to parents. I think we need to give money instead of like saying if you have kids and you work, you get paid less taxes, as if you have kids, you get direct cash. I think that's a better way of doing it because then it helps stay-at-home mothers. I think that's something we should go after too. So, but increased child tax credit, that's a good thing. It limited state income tax deductions. Now you might think, why is that a good thing? Because what's happening is that those deductions allowed New York and California to tax the shit out of their residents and then not pay any federal income taxes. So all taxes went to the states. And the government's like, well, you can't just deduct all your taxes from, it limited it to 10,000. So you can't just limit all your New York and California, the deductions. You have to pay federally. And, yes, that's raising taxes, but it's a loophole liberals want because they could tax the shit in the state and then they could just deduct everything from the federal. So it's a way they could just tax people. And this was a good way to get back at the blue states. Also got rid of, as I mentioned in my healthcare thing and last time, they also got rid of the individual mandate, which was a good thing. I'll reiterate, if you're going to give me healthcare, I'll pay through my taxes, through like a payroll tax. Don't force me to buy some private company's bullshit. Another thing it did, which was mixed, was the corporate tax cut. Now, I'm not a big fan. I think when it was before the tax cut, it was 35%, which is way too high. The corporate tax should have been lower. It went down to 21%. I would be fine raising it a little bit to like 25% maybe, to make sure that, and I probably would make it progressive. I think I would make multinational corporations pay a high corporate tax, but then like small corporations pay little tax, and business taxes should be low as well for American businesses. However, we need to be competitive. Like, we can't just tax the shit out of corporations. If we do too high, they'll leave. I know that's libertarianish, but I actually it is true, though. That is one thing I am kind of more economically libertarian on, is that corporate taxes shouldn't be, we shouldn't be punitive, but it should be, obviously all these big corporations are now woke, so maybe I am, but on an economic sense, it doesn't make much sense to how high corporate tax is. But I would be fine raising it a little bit to fund things. However, again, the biggest thing about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is that, we didn't need it. We actually need higher taxes on the rich. We don't need lower income taxes, lower taxes overall. I think people need to pay extra taxes, and we need to slash spending where we need to slash spending. And invest where we need to invest. And if we do that, we could balance the budget if we wanted to. Now, so the taxes is again, I'm in favor of small tax increases, and because everyone has to pay in, and we need to increase our taxes to make sure we balance the budget, and we to invest in the things we need to invest in, and tax cuts aren't the things we need to do, especially since everyone's making record profit. Now, another thing is that, Trump always says this, but yes, it is true that he presided and, increased the, higher wage growth, lower, higher stock market, lower unemployment, all that. So the stock market's high, unemployment was down, and, all those types of things. Yes, that's true, and that's a good indicator. But however, the president has very little power over the economy, and it's not like Trump did. It was in a way also part of Obama's legacy, as after Obama left, things started getting better and better. But Trump also. It's also as much as it wasn't Obama's complete fault that the economy got back on track, it's also not completely Donald Trump's fault that the economy kept getting better and better. But yes, it was fine. But again, he didn't do anything to fix the fundamental reworkings of the economy, which is that America needs to be resilient and strong. It has to be self-sufficient. It has to help the average workers. There was no minimum wage increase, no extra worker benefits, no way to help workers out, no ways to strengthen unionship, to make sure that workers aren't out in the cold. And no major changes. Now, besides the CARES Act and all that, which was pretty good for workers, people still, costs of living are rising, and wages are barely going up. It was going up under Trump, as I mentioned, but not as much as the costs. So people are really getting really, really rich, and people who are middle class and working class are being, there could be a more equitable, a more decent, fair shot. And that does not mean we need revolution. I just think that there is better ways they could have done better things for workers, better things to help America in the general. Again, the economy's not anything. The stock market's not everything. So there wasn't any push on that front, despite fighting for American. He did some things in the economy which were good, so he's not a complete failure again. But I think it's a C plus overall for his economic things. I know that, the economy is the biggest thing, but I think people attribute that to Trump because because of all the good things that were happening. But Trump, if you're grading Trump on what he did as a person, he didn't actually, he's not the one who directly made all that happen. It was like a continuation of what was happening beforehand, and he just maintained it. And maybe because he presided over it, he gets good grades on the economy. But as soon as it plummeted, the economy remarks went away. So it wasn't like anything he specifically did, which is what I'm grading him on. It's basically what he kind of presided over, which was good. But what he actually did was not actually that much. So that's why it's only a C plus grading on the economic front. So the next batch of issues, kind of more broadly that we're gonna grade Trump on, are social issues and what I call based issues. Basically anything social issues, like culture war type stuff. How did he do in terms of actually fighting a conservative cause, advocating for conservative interests, advocating for the average American? How did he do? He did pretty good. He did a lot of good things. Again, a lot of the good things, though, is that he didn't do as much as I wanted. But again, this is not idealized. This is what he did versus what he did bad. And what he did good at, he did pretty well in terms of what he did. The biggest thing that he did, which was really good, and he did this very early on, and is he banned critical race theory being taught in government. This was really good. And some people are, they're trying to weasel their way around, but this was a really straightforward answer about banning it in government. I mean, obviously you can't. This is a washed up. This is a destructive, a Marxist ideology. This is a really anti-white ideology, an anti-American, anti-white ideology. It needs to be crushed. And I would have gone further. I would have basically directed the Department of Labor to basically prevent any businesses that work for the government. I would have made it a Justice Department policy to basically advocate for abolishing or basically saying, if you have specific racial quotas that you hire for, we're going to hire this much black people, you're teaching this type of crap in your businesses, we're going to go after you, and we're going to sue you as a attorney general and as the Justice Department. I would have gone a lot more, but as a standalone, it's really solid. Another thing he did that was really awesome was he had an executive order saying that all new federal buildings must use classical architecture. I think this is overlooked. I think if you look at a lot of Western new buildings, they're just these concrete soulless structures which have no soul to them. These are disgusting things. And I think actually I think architecture is something overlooked. I think we need to have more beautiful kind of classical architecture, Gothic architecture, and romantic architecture. But these brutalist, these modern art, modernist things are disgusting. These have no soul. They're just concrete shit. And I think it was a good on having federal buildings be made from a specific classical architecture. Another thing he did in terms of monuments is that he passed the thing that if you destroy federal monuments, you get prison time. I think this was a very solid act. I think it, basically says if you just, I think we need to expand that to statues. I think he wanted to make like a garden of presidential heroes. I think that was a good step of American heroes, I should say. But I think they should expand it to cover more, we should go under like a cultural reawakening to reawaken our heritage. What's one bad thing that he did, though? There is one bad thing, and that is he never acted on big tech censorship. He never did. He spoke a lot about it. He wanted to get Section 238 on it, but honestly, Section 230 is like not the best thing you could do, to be quite honest with you. That's not the best thing. Then what happens is that the companies actually have a reason to kick you off. It's like, oh, we don't want to be sued, so we kicked you off. What you need to do is treat it as a public. What has to be done with big tech censorship is that you have to make all these things, all these social media companies, like treat as the new public square. You cannot kick people off. It's like you can't kick people off your electrical grid. People. This is free speech, and you cannot basically get kicked out of it. You can, and if you think a bunch of multinational corporations should determine who gets to speak and which leaders get to say, you're putting too much hands in their power, and they don't have the right to violate the rights like that, and he did no action on it. He should have been aggressive. And now they, at the end, as they had the final say, and they kicked him off, now that he's leaving. In terms of another good thing that he did, though, however, is that he brought back due process for students in colleges from sexual harassment. Right now, under Obama, is that if you get accused of sexual harassment, you get thrown in jail, and there's no due process. Now there is due process. There has to be like real evidence from the opposing party, like innocent before proven guilty, not guilty before proven innocent because of your political correct feelings. This was a good, obviously I think sexual harassment's overdone. I think people, the Me Too thing, they overdid what that means. Anyway, another thing that they did is he did nothing to expand gun rights while in office. That's a bad thing that he did. In fact, he tried to infringe upon them more with a bump stock ban and arguing for red flag laws and such. And he said that he wanted to take guns away. Now, he never did anything like that, and that was just an argument. But if you're a gun person, Donald Trump wasn't a pro. He talked a big game, but he didn't do much to protect guns. He should have advocated for, when Republicans were in power, advocating for a few pro-gun things. The biggest thing in my mind is, now obviously maybe the new judges he appointed on this Supreme Court might protect assault rifles, but the biggest thing he could have done on his own, but this would have been legislatively, is basically say, if you, it's like how everyone could get guns based on a state level. Every state has a different way so you could get a gun permit. Well, if you get a driver's license, right, in Texas, that means you could drive in Oklahoma, right? But same thing. So if you get a gun license in Texas, you get to get guns in Oklahoma. So it's like a universal statewide, like no matter where you could get guns if you get it from one state. Basically, that would really help undercut liberal people and undercut liberals from imposing rigid bans. But he did do that. Guns were. Oh, sorry, I'm a bit tired. It wasn't his best thing. In terms of criminal justice, though, he passed the First Step Act, which was another big legislative thing that he did. I'm actually now Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization, and it's an anti-American organization. It's based on utter lies and falsehoods about what America is and the nature about black people being oppressed or not. I've made many videos about that. However, he did try to, however, despite that, there is some things to be said about lowering criminal rates. I generally don't think there should be lots of criminal laws. Generally, I think there is a balance to be had. There is something to be said about America having the most prisoners per population. Now, that's because of a certain, group within America, that commits a lot of the crimes. But, there is something to be said about, generally, I am kind of libertarianish. I think there is something to be said about letting some things not be criminal. Um, but however, there was a balance. He tried to, for example, a good thing he did is he expanded he allowed the federal death penalty to put to death 13 really horrible people. Very horrible people, and I'm in favor of the death penalty. I think he did good. I mean, in the long scheme of things, didn't. I mean, that's okay. That's like a good thing he did, but has really no significance. But there's some stuff to it about it. But anyway, um, another thing that he did in terms of criminal justice is that during one thing he did that was bad is that he was very he talked a big game, but he also was big on like, oh, we remember George Floyd, and he was under the illusion of like he was both, oh, Biden's for the crime, he was for the crime bill, he's pro, locking up criminals, but he's also, he's also like, I'm also like, he's also an anarchist, so it's like, it's all these types of BS things. Um, and so he was a big, it was a big, um, he was waffly on the riots. However, he tried, and the thing is with the riots is that looking back at them prospectively, there was not a lot he could have done. He, if he sent in the military, like it would have been really. I think this could have been a case where he could have seized power, but like if you send in the military to crush them, it's like you're just going to inflame the tensions even more. But there is some. I think he did try to send National Guard units. He did try to send things, and there's something to be said about that. And so yeah, he also didn't do any action on porn, except he did sign a law about trying to combat sex traffickers, which was good. So there were I am kind of he did not send troops during the riots, but could have backfired. But he did what he could. I think he did decent. I don't think I think if we were in his situation, we would have, we would have not done things perfectly because it was unfold. People were rioting, things were going, crazy, and all these lies about BLM was just completely garbage, and he was waffly on that, but not a biggest failure on it, but not perfect either. So overall, I give him a solid B as a grade for his social issues. The next parts of things I'm going to focus on grading Donald Trump on is how he handled America's energy, and by extension also how did he help with the environment. Now, as a side note, I am this is another issue besides healthcare where I am left wing on. The environment's one of my biggest issues too. I think environment is the most important. It's the richness of this is the nation. This is the nation. This is like the richness of America. This is like what it means to be American for the environment. And but he did do something. So the first thing he did was that we became the number one energy exporter of oil in the world. We no longer rely on foreign oil, which was good. This was a great thing. And despite, I want more renewable energy, this was a great thing for America. I think this was a really great thing. We've stocked up on reserves. This is a great way to be energy sufficient, and we're exporting oil. This was a great thing, and I think Trump deserves credit for that. However, besides energy-wise, he did make less. He did he didn't make any big push to make more greener energy, even in nuclear, which should be something with Republicans should support, like nuclear energy, but he didn't. He had no plan to invest in, wind, solar, nuclear, and anything. All he did was just keep, he tariffed even solar panels coming in, and he was very, and in his in terms of energy, things just kept going along in the private sector, and he didn't do anything to help speed that process up, which was a big letdown, at least to me. Remember, this is me grading, so I'm big on green tech. However, and also in terms of the environment, though, he withdrew from the Paris Climate Pact. And while yes, the Paris Climate Pact does have some downsides in the sense that it lets a lot of actors off the hook, I think it was not binding too much, and I think it would have been better just to stay in. Now, I'm not a big thing about it, but I think there needs to be international, or this is one place I think internationally we should work together to help overcome the environmental catastrophe and environmental climate change. However, also in terms of who he represented for the EPA, he proposed cuts for the EPA in his budget proposals. He kept polluting there was less enforcement on pollution controls. It's been reported that his administration put less emphasis on like doing pollution fines and such. There wasn't much, there was just too much polluting and too much like there was no like enforcement of helping that out. And honestly, that's he should have been more stronger on the environment. I know he's not a big global warming person. I know he's not an environment thing, but that's just one thing Trump's not good at. And however, one thing he did do good for the environment, though, he signed the Bipartisan Great Outdoors Act, which put tens of millions, I believe, or billions, a lot of money into national parks, and I think expanded the amount of national parks, or at least expanded the amount of that current national parks hold. Basically helped clean up, and basically was a really good bipartisan achievement to help invest in regions that were hard hit. And I think that was a really solid strategy. I believe he did a very good he signed it, I think, and obviously he wasn't he didn't advocate for it, but he signed it, and I think that deserves some credit. And honestly, but in terms of overall, I give him a C minus, actually a D plus maybe. Now that I think about it, he did a bunch of things that basically he did no action. He continuously tried to prevent the development of green tech. He did do some good things. He signed the Great Outdoors Act. We became an exporter for the first time, and other things. But he loosened regulations on control on environmental regulations and such. He was pretty bad on the environment. On energy, he again, the exporter of oil thing was pretty good, but honestly, again, this is from my perspective. Now, as from other guys' perspective, you guys might not be as downtrodden about this, but I am kind of. I think he should. I think he should have been like a Teddy Roosevelt in the sense that he was very big, a patriot that was in tune with the environment and was a big helper of that. And I think that should have been Trump, but maybe I'm just being wishful thinking. But this is just my personal grading, and I think he could have done better with the environment and such. One thing that we cannot leave out when we talk about Donald Trump's presidency is his effect on the judiciary and judges. He has appointed a lot. I think he's now pushed more judges than Obama put in his 8 years in office and just his 4 years of office. And while, and that's great. I think him and his new two Supreme Court justices have at least put a center-right. I know in Supreme Court-wise, the government is, a lot of people think, it's a far-right Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court is just center-left. Roberts is a liberal, and even Gorsuch is now the new flip vote. It's still a 5-4, you could say, conservative court, but in no way is it going to just roughshod over everything. It's going to be very minor in terms of what it does. So there's that. Also, there's a but in terms of solidifying it even more after, and especially since Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, it's been pretty solid. And I think his and not just the Supreme Court, I think this was also McConnell. Now McConnell's not the best person, but I think his Machiavellian thing of pushing judges has been brilliant. I think it was a really good ploy to help strengthen that and put it into GOP hands, and push at least nominally conservative judges. And I think, but the thing is that they haven't ruled so good. I would put this as an A, like judges being an A, like at least a good A. However, his judges have ruled pretty shitty, Gorsuch in particular and such. But they've ruled that, he expanded rights to transvestites to make them equal, which was horrible. That means women's sports are going to be completely destroyed because of that ruling. He basically gave all of Oklahoma to the Indians, basically. This was really horrible in terms of how they ruled. Now, he's ruled on some good things on other issues, but again, it's yes, just because you nominate someone on the court doesn't mean that's automatically good for you. And we could see that while, yes, their judges were all right, it's not as good as it could be. And so, for that, I'll just give him a B+. I think the judges were a really good Machiavellian trick. but they deserve a part of his grade here. So the last thing I'm going to actually grade him on is his personal governing style. How did Trump act and how did he run as a leader? There's a lot of things to say about this. I've already touched this on in a few ways throughout the time I've been on talking about the other issues, but I think this is worth saying. And, I am pretty issues focused, but I think there is a talent to being a leader that goes beyond just what you push. And while I think I've touched on major sectors of what he did on where he pushed, I think there could have been more there's a certain act of being a leader, how you govern, what's your strategy, and I'm going to grade him on that as well. So what did he do good? One good thing that he did was that he was good at fighting the press. The press is the enemy of the people. It is beyond liberally slanted. It is radically left-wing. And he didn't let the media define the agenda. He defined the agenda. He did not let the media set the narrative. He set the narrative. He's the one who was able to push a message. And that is what we need. We need a fighter who could push the message. I will get to on some bad sides about him going a bit too far sometimes, but there is an act. I think there is a play towards being good with being a good fighter against the media, and I think he did that job well. That was a really good way of fighting the media because people hate the media, and the media needs to be called out. You can't just let the media define themselves as these neutral arbiters. They need to be cracked down upon and fought, and he did good on that. Nothing to complain about, really. However, one thing that he was a good fighter, not just against the media, but also against in terms of how other politicians, and he was a good fighter. However, sometimes he was a bit petty and stupid. There needs to be a balance between being a fighter and a leader. Sometimes he was direct and calm. Other times he just made things worse. I think so on one hand, yes, he was a good fighter, but also he was actually really, he was petty. We can't ignore that Trump was, we needed someone who could be a fighter, who could fight, but was also serious. I know maybe sometimes you will get someone who maybe leans more towards one or the other, and I think Trump leaned a bit too heavily on, not being so controlled. I think he was especially during the COVID thing. I think if he was a lot more serious during COVID, he would have won. So there's something to be said about that, and so there needs to be. I think he was really bad on. I think he leaned too much on being petty, being kind of stupid, kind of not being such a. But there needs to be a balancing between being a fighter and being an effective leader, and I think Trump was a good fighter, but he sometimes picked too many fights and alienated too many people. He needs to alienate the right people. I would say that. Another thing that he did that was not that I didn't like, though, is he was a bad administrator. I think he was a really bad governor in terms of how he ran his administration. I think a lot of the bad actions, his delays, a lot of his administration stupidity is not because of Trump specifically, but because of how he governed. He put rhinos in charge. He put America Last politicians in charge of departments, and they started running things like liberals and not Trump's America First agenda. Trump did not know, and I don't blame Trump, but Trump did not know how to operate the government federal bureaucracy, and he didn't know how to assign positions well. He didn't know how to assign good subordinates. He didn't know how to effectively use the government bureaucracy to his advantage to help, wield it to help push conservative causes, to help push the conservative political cause, cultural cause, and so forth. He did some good things with it, but he didn't. He was a bad administrator. Now, I don't blame Trump, and, maybe if anyone who was never, remember, he was never in government, and, so, he never understood how the ins and outs worked, and so, this was definitely something that he needed to, he was not so good at, and it was actually led to a lot of failings. But one thing he did do good on, another thing I would say about his personal governing style, is that he was really well connected with his base. He always threw red meat, and not just symbolic red meat. He put effort to try to appease his supporters. He would always go out. He would use Twitter and social media to be connected with his voters. He was not some faceless, disconnected bureaucrat or some faceless leader. He was an actual person fighting. He like seemed like he had your back. He wasn't just someone you sent to Washington and they're like, okay, goodbye. You know, there is something to be said about how he was connected with the people, I believe. That's something that I think that was really good in terms of his personal governing style. And those are just some thoughts. I think those are kind of some broad things. Overall, I think as all those things said, I think I would give him a B plus, maybe just a B. I think he could have done better in some things, but his fighting. Honestly, maybe sometimes like. The thing is with Trump about him being too much of a fighter is that you're not going to get some. We're gonna swing to the other direction. Someone can't fight well, and I remember I'm young, but I'm not too young where I don't remember. But I do remember where people wanted a fighter. We wanted someone who would fight the media, someone who would fight the liberals, someone who would fight for us, and he is that fighter, even if he is sometimes a bit alienating, and a little bit stupid sometimes. And we wish he was not as stupid, and we wish he was just alienating some specific people, not being a total asshat sometimes. But this is what we got, and sometimes I can't complain. I can't complain. So overall, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I kind of ran through all my notes there, broke down issue by issue. And overall, what do I give him as an overall grade? I think he's a solid B president. In terms of what he did, he obviously from my point of view. Now, there's many people's point of view who are more, especially people who maybe are very more fervent Trump supporters. They're not as big on the environment. They're not as big on healthcare as I am. And if you're just a standard Republican, honestly, he's an A minus president. Maybe he's not perfect in every single way, but he's an A president. And just for me, I'm a bit of a all over the political spectrum, and so on my thing, he's a solid B president. He could have done a lot more. A lot of it just comes down to he could have done a lot more, and he should have done things in certain ways. And very rarely has he done like actual horrible things, actual bad things. Some things he should some things are just like maybe I disagree with it, but it's not anything big. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it wasn't his bad stuff that he did. He did a lot of good stuff. He just, at the end of the day, you could say that Trump had a lot of missed opportunities. He didn't do the right things at the right time. He didn't know how to administer properly. He didn't know how to govern. But he was our fighter. He fought for the right things, and he did the best he could. And just, he could have done better, though. He did good, but he could have done better. And he obviously sometimes in my personal opinion, did some things wrong in healthcare and the environment. But besides that, he was pretty good. Immigration solid. Foreign policy was, good. Everything was. There is again ups and downs. He's not now according to an idealized version. Obviously, he's not perfect at all. But honestly, I don't know who's going to come after Trump. But I think we're going to look back at Trump like Republicans in their day thought back of Reagan. I really hope there is like someone comes out of the woodwork to push Trumpism, but in a more intelligent, coherent fashion. Someone who is Machiavellian, someone who is a fighter, but a steady hand. And I think we just have to hope, and maybe it could be one of us. We all have to contribute, but we'll see. So, that's the end of this video. Hope you like, favorite, and subscribe, or, comment and everything, and share this around. Aim high, wander on, from America with Russian love.